Hello again. Yep, I'm doing 2 videos in one day. I am that lame. I wanted to take the time outside of my challenge video because that video was super long anyway, and I apologize for that. I wanted to praise a couple of podcasts that I've recently discovered on iTunes. Now, what a podcast is it is a pre-recorded show. Radio talk show is the closest thing I can think to describe it as. And you can get them all over the place. There are websites such as Podorama.com. You can get them through iTunes, the iTunes store. You can get them through Zune if you have a Zune, etc., etc. And they're all different kinds. There's podcasts for everything. There's do-it-yourself filmmaking podcasts where they give you tips and tricks about making films. There's celebrity news podcasts. There are classic rock podcasts. Anything. There are ones that play music shows. There are ones that just discuss things, don't play music at all. You find ones that you enjoy, and you can download them for free. I do mine through iTunes just because I have an iPod, so it works out. But whatever you use, Podorama.com, Zune, etc. It's a whole lot of cool material out there that people don't really know about. And I've just recently come across podcasts, and me being the big Beatles nerd that I am, of course, I typed in The Beatles in my iTunes store, clicked podcasts, and then all these Beatles podcasts came up. And I've been going through them for the past couple weeks, listening to different ones and finding which ones I really like and subscribing to those and getting their shows every week or every day or every month, however often they update. And I've got my top, how many are there here? 8 that I really enjoy and I wanted to share with you guys. So if you have iTunes, you can just go to your iTunes store and search the names of these podcasts, or you can just search The Beatles and then narrow your search to podcasts, and then it'll list all the Beatles-related podcasts. All the ones that I've found are free. I have not found a single podcast on iTunes that charges me, although I'm sure they're out there. And some of them are half an hour long, some of them are an hour long. A couple of these that I'll show you are only a minute to a minute and a half long. So they're not even going to take up a whole lot of room on your iPod. You can delete them when you're done with them. Your iTunes will automatically delete them after you listen to them. So that helps keep it clear. So it's not going to bog down a whole lot of stuff. But just, you need to check these out because they're really cool. The first one I have here, I've already told you about. It's called the Fab Fourum. F-A-B F-O-U-R-U-M. Fab Fourum. You can search them on iTunes. They're also on Podorama.com. They're really cool. It's this panel of about 4 guys, I think, and they're all somehow Beatles experts, Beatles historians. They've written books about the Beatles. They've done radio shows about the Beatles. They're really into the Beatles, and they cover really cool topics. Someone posted a comment on the profile of the channel asking us to review the stereo or mono remasters that just came out, the CDs. I don't have either set, so I can't review those for you. I know Sabrina has one or other of the sets. She's talked about it before. But just in case we don't get around to that, you can go to the Fab Fourum podcast on Podorama.com or through iTunes, and they have 2 shows, so an hour's worth of where they review the stereo remasters. And later they're supposed to do the mono remasters. So you can listen to them. They know all the technical stuff. They can tell you anything you think of that you want to know about the remasters. So that's my hint to you. My second favorite podcast about the Beatles is aptly called the Beatles Podcast. Now what this is it's a series of interviews with Beatles people. Some of the ones I've listened to, they interviewed Giles Martin, George Martin's son, about the recent George Harrison remasters that came out. I also listened to an interview with Yoko Ono where she was discussing the Imagine DVD. And I've also listened to an interview with Paul McCartney where he's talking about the Memory Almost Full CD. So, there's recent ones. For instance, in the Giles Martin interview, that's really recent because they talk about the Beatles Rock Band game and that stuff, and they're putting out new podcasts. It's an active podcast, so is Fab Fourum. Some of the ones I'm going to mention are static podcasts, meaning there's only 6 shows, that's all there's ever going to be, and they don't update. Beatles Podcast and Fab Fourum do update. Fab Fourum is weekly. Beatles Podcast is sort of sporadically. My third favorite Beatles-related podcast is a static one. There's only about 6 or 7 shows, I believe, and that's all there's ever going to be. And it's called John Lennon, The Rolling Stones Interview. And that's exactly what it is. It's just the audio separated into about hour-long pieces of John Lennon's interview with the Rolling Stones in 1970. Was it 1970? 1971? Shoot, I can't remember. You know, the one where he rambles about the Beatles breakup, and it's one of the interviews where he talks in depth about his time with the Beatles. It's really great to listen to. The audio is a little choppy because the interviewer was not mic'd. So whenever you hear the interviewer, the audio picks up because they have to turn up the audio from John's mic to be able to hear the interviewer, and then they turn it back down so John's not yelling at you. So the audio is a little choppy, but once you get used to it, it's really cool to listen. I've read the interview several times, but it's a whole different thing getting to hear John's voice and the interviewer asking the questions, and Yoko's voice. It's really cool. I really enjoyed that one. Number 4 is another John one. I apologize, but I'm a John girl, so. This one's called John Lennon, The Lost Tapes. This one I love because they're tapes of John either doing demos of songs or performing songs. And also there's a lot of segments where he would go to a radio station and like guest DJ. And the cool thing about this particular podcast is it leaves the songs in there. When John is at the DJ booth and he's talking and chatting and then he plays a song, this podcast plays the song. A lot of times if you listen to the audio elsewhere of John's DJing, I don't know, what do you call it? It cuts out the songs. It'll just have John talking and little blips where the songs would be. But this particular podcast plays the whole song, and I love that. I love it because I like to hear what John wanted us to hear, what he was playing and all that stuff. I love that. So John Lennon, The Lost Tapes is a good one. The only thing I hate about it is Elliot Mintz narrates it, and his voice just gets on my nerves. But if you can get past that, it's a great podcast. Number 5 is WMGK, Andre Gardner's Beatles Minute. Long title, but it's a very short podcast, a minute long, hence the title, Beatles Minute. And it's just Beatles news. And he seems to post every day, sometimes every other day. And it's just a minute's worth of Beatles news. And there's another one out there, which I'm going to tell you is number 6. It's called the Beatle Briefs Podcast, and it's the same thing. It's a minute to a minute and a half of Beatles news. Beatle Briefs updates once a week. The Andre Gardner's Beatles Minute updates more often. I subscribe to both because I like them a lot. Number 7 is Go The Beatles Podcast. This is a pretty cool one. If you've heard of Go The Beatles, that's what it is. And the one I listened to yesterday was all about the Hard Day's Night film. And they went through each song in the film and told you a little bit of trivia about the recording of it. And they play some more rare takes of the songs. They don't just play you the songs from the album. They give you like take number 10. And then they tell you something interesting about the song and its creation and its recording and blah, blah, blah. And that's a pretty neat little radio show podcast. And then my last one, number 8, is Pat Matthews' Beatles-a-Rama podcast. I like this one a lot, but it's not my favorite for several reasons. Mainly because the shows that I downloaded all had to do with early Beatles, and I have to be in an early Beatles mood to enjoy early Beatles music. And right now, I'm more in a White Album kind of mood. So for an hour of rambling about, they don't really ramble, I'm rambling. The show is far more directed than anything that I put on YouTube, for instance. But when he's talking about the studio years from 61 to 63, if I'm not in that kind of mood, I'm not interested. So the podcast is a great one. But for me right now, I'm not really into the early stuff. So I'm going to try and find some of his shows that have to do with maybe the later years. And I'll be into that. And then give me a couple months and I'll be back into the early Beatles and I'll love those podcasts. So, oh my God, 9 minutes and 37. Oh my God, this is forever. Those were my top 8 Beatles-related podcasts, the ones that I like. Check them out. Those are all from iTunes. If you know of any anywhere else or any other ones that are on iTunes, let me know in a video or text response. And also give these a listen and then let me know in a video or text response whether you liked them or you didn't like them or you think I'm crazy or if I need to shut up, which I do. Bye.